Namaskar, I'm Milind Pan Patil, Director, National Water Academy, Central Water Commission, Ministry of Jal Shakti, Pune. Welcome to all senior officers from Ministry of Jal Shakti, Central Water Commission, CWS officers, and other Water Resources Department, Irrigation Department of State Government. Hearty welcome to the fourth session of webinar series on interstate river water disputes in India. Our previous session was on the overview of existing and proposed water regulation in India. In our previous session, we seen the very important topics related to this proposed water regulations in India, that is Water Act 1974, Environmental Act 1984, then Policy Statement, Amendment Pollution 1992, then National Environmental Policy, the Forest Conservation Policy, then Forest Conservation Act and Dam Safety Act. These so many important bills as well as act was seen in last webinar session. Now today is our fourth webinar session, and in this session we will see today the national water policy. This is also a very important topic related to this topic. To speak on this topic today with us and very renowned expert officer to speak on this topic, Shri A.B. Pandya sir. First, before start this session, I will first briefly introduce to our today's eminent speaker, Shri A.B. Pandya sir. Shri A.B. Pandya sir was born in 1955 and alumni of Indian Institute of Technology, IIT New Delhi. He did his MTech in Structural Engineering in 1983. Shri Pandya sir has over 40 years of professional experience in water resources and irrigation planning, design, implementation, and financing. He has a sound knowledge of various aspects of irrigation and drainage engineering with strong competence in technologies in core areas, especially information technology. His specialization in dam design and related activities. He has over 20 technical publications in his credit. Shri Pandya sir began his career with Central Water Commission in 1977 as an assistant director and later served as chairman and ex officio secretary to the Government of India. In his professional career, he occupied top position in various Government of India offices under the Ministry of Jal Shakti, then Ministry of Water Resources, including Director General, National Water Development Agency, NWDA, and Chairman and Managing Director, National Projects Construction Corporation, NPCC. He also served as the Vice President and Secretary General of ICID for the period of 2014-16 and made active contribution to the various activities of the Commission. And avid proponent of irrigation and hydropower projects, he has been a key figure behind the establishment of international flagship event India Water Week for MOWR, which is presently in its edition, and also established the National Conference on Dam Safety, an annual event with assistance from World Bank funded Dam Rehabilitation Improvement Project BRIEF, formerly Chairman Central Water Commission, an apex body under Government of India, New Delhi. Presently, he is working as a Secretary General in ICID. Before start this session, now I request Shri Pandya sir. Sir, kindly start your session and enlighten us to our participant on the very important topic of national water policy. Because sir, you are involved in framing the national water policy of India. Sir.
Thank you. Thank you, Milind. And it's a great pleasure to be here with you, discussing a topic of very great interest to all of us regarding the how do we manage our water resources across the country and its immediate neighborhood. I hope I am audible to all of you. Milind, I am okay?
Yes, sir. You are audible,
Okay.
sir.
Okay, fine. So let us start with the national water policy. The national water policy is a document which basically sets up a number of guiding principles through which the water resources of the country are required to be managed. Water policy has been a very important and also a very controversial document. There are various worldviews on the management of water, and simultaneously, there are various ways in which the people think that there will be a different kind of a management regime that will be there for managing our water resources. On top of it, we have a situation in which the federal structure of the constitution provides the prime utilization and utilizable water management in the hands of the individual state governments without adequately recognizing the inherent nature of our water resources, which are interstate in nature. Even though there have been provisions in the constitution which have provided us with certain leverages, but then under various situations and constraints of the political establishments, those provisions are not adequately used, or they are not adequately strengthened. So this makes the water resources management in the country in a very complex and a very difficult kind of situation. As we all know, there is only one hydrological cycle. There are no state-wise hydrological cycles. There are no even, sometimes not even country-wise hydrological cycles. The hydrological cycle is affecting the entire South Asia, and which is a hydrologically connected entity. We all are having common hydrological resources, common water resources, water resources conveyance structures and natural features. And because of that, the national policies also have a very strong impact on how and in what manner we deal with the international or transboundary aspects of water. So national water policy, in a way, provides us with a very large canvas in which we are required to write. And there have been efforts of writing of these principles over the past periods of time. And some of them have been more accepted than the rest of them. But all the same, the work is sometimes continuing. At the beginning, let me introduce briefly about the ICID, the International Commission on Irrigation and Drainage, where I am presently working as the Secretary General. Interestingly, ICID and the major institutions at the central level, like Central Water Commission, etc., are all sharing the same lineage. That means we all started in 1945. The government started conceptualizing these organizations, and then eventually the ICID got established in 1950. And this was the first international organization that the country established after achieving its independence. So this is an organization which is very closely related to the water resources management of the country, especially being housed in India. It has been a very challenging and a very interesting journey that the international organization had vis-a-vis the country as a whole. The basic concept of the International Commission is to achieve a water secure world free of poverty and hunger through sustainable rural development. And there are various goals which are set as our 2030 agenda, wherein the goals are all oriented towards efficiently and properly utilizing the water resources of the world. ICID has got a very wide network. We can say that about 95% of the irrigated area of the world is being looked after by various member countries of ICID, and in general, ICID represents a knowledge base which spreads over about 95% of the irrigated areas of the world. We have got very large activities and initiatives which are there, where the country is able to participate in a very efficient and very nice manner. So now we will talk about the National Water Policy 2012, which is the latest version. There have been attempts right from 1986. We had a policy in 1986, and then we had it again in 2002. And then after 10 years, it was considered that let us revise the policy. So we revised that policy in 2012. In 2012, there were very wide consultations, and the wider consultations resulted in a policy document which has got a relatively more comprehensive coverage than the previous editions of the National Water Policy. So the objective of the National Water Policy is to take cognizance of the existing situation, to propose a framework for creation of a system of laws and institutions, and for a plan of action with a unified national perspective. Now, this is the basic principle of National Water Policy. However, we can say that even though the cognizance of the existing situation is being taken in the policy documents, but then the creation of a system of laws and institutions are something which are not yet taken up in a manner that would have sufficiently addressed the issues that are presented by the existing situation. And unfortunately, right from the beginning, from 1986 onwards, we are lacking a plan of action with a unified national perspective. There is a lot of emphasis on creating the policy, adopting the policy getting adopted by various state governments with some modifications here and there. But then the important part is that the policy is basically a statement of intentions. These are intentions that you are able to provide, that this is what we would like to do. But then the questions are very important: how you would like to do it, who would do it, what are the measures that will be required in order to do that particular, achieve that particular goal. Who will finance these measures? How these finances will be mobilized? How the technologies will be mobilized in order to achieve all these goals? What other societal measures that are required in order to see that these goals are indeed achieved by virtue of providing the hardware, and then the society as a whole provide the software, that is the use management of the available resources with the available infrastructure. This is a plan of action which requires to be generated. However, till now, we have been unable to generate such a plan of action. So to that extent, the individual aims of the policy that we actually started out with are not really fully met. So these are something which we need to really think about. I have tried to forward a very enlightening paper on these aspects by Mr. Chetan Pandit, who might also be addressing you later on, but more in the areas of the interstate water conflicts. But he did a lot of soul searching on the water policies, and then he has put in a very good document, which I hope that the NWA will be able to share the link with all of you for you also to read, because this is something which is quite enlightening. All the same, we will keep the focus first on the national water policy. So the guiding principles of the national water policy is, number one is that is a common pool community resource held by the state under public trust doctrine to achieve food security, livelihood, ensure equitable and sustainable development for all. It's a common pool community resource. This is the important part. The common pool resource is something which is required to be shared, and the sharing in respect of water is something which is having multiple dimensions. Most of the time there have been a talk about the quantity sharing, but then the quantity sharing doesn't always result in an equitable usage or equitable use of the water by virtue of our hydrological cycle. So the area that has to be also seen is the time-wise distribution and the time-wise demand supply management for all the stakeholders is becoming very, very important, and with which we have to really look at the way the policy is to be tailored or policy is to be managed. There are, of course, the various other areas like the safe water for drinking and sanitation is the prime need, and then the food security becomes the next need, and then the minimum ecosystem needs have also been incorporated in the policy. The quality and quantity are interlinked, and they need to be managed in an integrated manner consistent with broader environmental management. And it is essential for the sustenance of the ecosystem. So now the concept of providing the ecosystem also is also incorporated to some extent in the policy. So the focus areas is that how the water supply and sanitation will be managed for the provision of safe drinking water in rural and urban India. The demand management and water use efficiency. This is a very, very important topic. We have been discussing this topic since very long periods of time, and still the situation is far from satisfactory. So this focus area is something which needs further more detailed understanding and also examination. Intrinsic balance of water supply and demand. This is another part which we also have to look at along with the demand management and water use efficiency. How do we achieve a balance? The balance is something which is very difficult to achieve in all cases. There are areas of the country who do not have that much amount of local water resources availability, but because of various other developments, there are large amount of demands, and because of that, achieving the water supply and demand balance is a challenge which most of the countries struggle with, and they have to come to a solution which doesn't lead to unnecessary social or political tensions. So it's a very, very, it's even though it is a simple sentence that is there, the issue of the achieving of this intrinsic balance is a very important area for the water policy and the strategy that will have to be followed as a part of the policy. And this basically leads to a common integrated approach towards water management. That means how do we manage the water resources in an integrated manner so that all issues and all major utilization areas are addressed in a proper manner and also are tried to be satisfied to the extent possible. This leads us to the governance. Because it's a common pool resource, willy-nilly, it is essential that the government has to play a role in achieving the equitable distribution across various sectors and various stakeholders. So for that, the water governance becomes a very important part of the national water policy principles. Because if you do not have a governance principles, then ensuring various other guiding principles in practice become quite difficult. For that, the legal frameworks are required. They have to be implemented at various levels, like regional level, at the state level. And then also these governance principles will have to be applied with the transboundary agreements as well. Because once you move across the boundary of a nation, then the water context changes and it becomes a part of the overall interaction between two sovereign nations. And there are multiple issues that start coming in. The geopolitical issues start coming in. Various other economic issues start coming in. Security issues start coming in. Even military issues also start coming in. So how do you really govern? What principles you will adopt are something that are required to be addressed. The environmental concerns are also there because the environment management, so that we are able to sustain our development and also sustain our society without causing irreparable harm to other ecosystems that are also co-surviving and co-sharing the earth space with us is important. And there the environmental concerns also needs to be really addressed. Now, a new issue which used to be part of the environmental concern but becoming an important part is the climate change. The climate change becomes a focal area in its own, because the climate change has put in very strong impacts on the water resources management regime of the country because of the changes in the hydrological cycle that we are facing because of the climate change. So we need a continuously innovating regime. We need a regime where we keep on researching, we keep on building the capacities. Water resources projects in itself are very long gestation projects. And then once a project is built in, the project has a practically indefinite life. You can say an infinite life. You are never able to do away with that particular project in order to survive. So the persons keep on changing, the manpowers keep on changing, the technologies keep on changing, and that requires capacity building is a very important exercise. If you don't have capacities, then you cannot manage your assets. And then the importance is that of the implementation of the policy. What strategic frameworks for monitoring and evaluation to ensure smooth and efficient implementation mechanisms? This will cover many of the parts which we have discussed above. So the demand and management and water use efficiency has been dealt with in a relatively great detail, where the institutional arrangement for promotion, regulation, and mechanisms for efficient use of water at basin and sub-basin level. So what are the institutional arrangements? The basin is a collection of sub-basins, and sub-basins are also collection of sub-basins depending upon the size of the basin. So the institutional arrangement for managing our basins is something that has been very clearly emphasized by the national water policy. But however, we have not been able to make any great progress over that, even though we had a River Boards Act going as back as 1958. But then we haven't made any progress because of various thinking, various ownership patterns, of the local water resources by the state governments and the local stakeholders, who may be more vocal than some other groups of stakeholders. And those institutional arrangements are yet to really come to a very sustainable and a very sound manner. In fact, when I look at it from this institutional arrangement for promotion, regulation, and mechanisms for efficient use, what I find is that because of various other socio-political areas of interest in the local population, India is gradually seeing the subdivision of the states. We started out with certain administrative or political units in form of the states. Like we had this, at the time of independence, we had the presidencies like Bombay Presidency, Madras Presidency, like that. Then we further created the new states based on the linguistic identities. Now, the regional identities are also keeping their heads above and becoming more assertive. And this is creating further subdivision of the earlier states which survived for a pretty long time, but then now again this is happening. Even at the sub-regional level, there are demands for autonomy. Those demands are political in nature. We do not have anything much to say about them. But the fact remains is that when we create new units, because of the fragmentation, what used to be earlier a common resource in form of water gets into the need of subdivision, further subdivision, which was not really envisaged at the earlier points of time, and which may create further groups of interested parties in the management. And when the number of parties increase and you do not have a very strong coordinating mechanism, at times a very difficult situation occurs. That is seen in the increasing disputes at the interstate level in the water resources. The national water policy will have to address this particular part in a systematic manner. If we don't address this part, we will not be able to provide for the balanced water resources regime. Demand management and water use efficiency parts will not be really very easily achieved. The evolving of the benchmarks using project and basin water use efficiencies, structured financing to incentivize economic use of water, aligning cropping pattern with natural resource endowments, micro irrigation. All this demand management and water use efficiencies have a lot of impact on the regional and sub-regional areas. The supply side of balance also becomes quite difficult to achieve. We have a monsoon-based climate, and that climate, again coupled with the monsoon-based, very short and very intense monsoons that we are encountering these days, with extreme variability. Like in the same month this year, India went from a surplus to deficit monsoon. And we are now looking at the month of September very eagerly to see that ultimately we are able to at least achieve a normal monsoon. So, but the supplies are needed continuously. In fact, these bounties of July of this year have rather been wasted in form of floods, have rather gone unutilized in form of floods. And now there are crises in pockets of the country where the crops are withering because of the lack of water, because of extreme sunshine that has come up, high temperatures, very strong windy conditions that are prevailing in many parts of the country. and that is creating a extra demand on water. But then you don't have the storages of that nature where these kind of imbalances can at least be managed. So the storage management for the maintaining the supply side of balance is an area which has not been addressed very well. And the national water policy says that we would like to do that. But then how to do it? How to manage the governance part of this storages, which may be common pool resources, but located in individual different administrative or political units. This is becoming an important part, which now the water policy will have to address in a systematic manner. But still, they have been addressed in a technocratic manner in the national water policy, where we are looking at it from a scientist's point of view. We are not looking at it from a purely sociological or purely economic or purely political point of view. But these 2 points of view will have to be reconciled. The climate resilience will come essentially from the supply side of the balance. Unless you will have storages with a changing climate, the monsoon is going to be more and more unpredictable. Even though you will be at an average, you will be very satisfactorily cruising through from the point of view of total water. But then the water that will become available will be in spurts, whereas your demands are going to be more or less uniform throughout the year. Operation and management policies and financing, this will all require the climate resilience. And then we will also need to look at our assets much more closely in order to manage the supply side of the balance. We will have to be very careful on project planning and implementation. Very good suggestions are available in the National Water Policy Section 9, where the integrated water sources management has been propounded. There are, of course, all these water management principles have got certain pluses and certain minuses. Integrated water sources management is also one such issue. There are very eminent experts, world leaders, who debunk the idea of integrated water sources management. And there are equally vocal number of people in the scientific and in the management community who will swear by the integrated water sources management as the panacea for all the ills. All the same, the national water policy does provide for that the project planning and implementation has to be on IWRM principles. The execution strategies should be such that the beneficiaries start perceiving the benefits of the project as early as possible. The storage provision with the hydropower projects in order to also generate the green energy, which is coupled with the storage provisions, so that you are able to generate the additional storage. And then concurrent monitoring of the projects, how they are performing, how they are being implemented, what are the usages. So this will eventually lead us to balancing the demand supply equation. This intrinsic balance is something which I keep on referring in this national water policy. Now here, one important issue that comes is something where the thing needs to be really understood in an overall sense. The scientific moving in the direction of achieving a balance between demand and supply of water resources. The national water policy looks at water as an independent resource in its own right, required to fulfill requirements of India. It's very important when we are dealing with the policy, it's very important to know that we cannot, in the name of water policy, encroach in the other fields and start dictating something which is essentially located in a different domain. Like national water policy cannot become a tool for managing our food preferences. Our food preferences are our own independent choices. And those food preferences determine the demand for various agricultural products. And the agricultural products will have to be produced in tune with the demands. And if we do that, that may not have a very desirable impact on the balance between demand and supply of water resource. But then the national water policy cannot make any kind of demands, any kind of peremptorily demanding that you should do this and you should not do this kind of situation. So this intrinsic balance of water supply and demand, that water policy document has to go through very delicately. How we achieve this is an issue which is still under debate. We have had, after the national water policy of 2012, we had another committee of which I was also a part for some points of time. And we had a very great debate, because there what happened was that we found that the areas which are being talked about having an impact on the water resources management, but are landing up in the different domain. And that domain being a domain where the individual choices are getting involved, those domains will not, in a democratic kind of a situation, those domains are not likely to hit to your demands and your policies which you will try to impose upon them. So a very large consultative accommodative regime will have to be achieved in respect of water policy when we really look at the water policy. Another very important thing which I found that word very interesting, the dictatorship of hydrology in water management. Hydrology is a science which looks at the occurrence of water in various forms on the earth, and then how the water flows down, and how the water goes through the cycle, hydrological cycle. And any policy, anything that we do will have to honor this cycle. This is the governing cycle. You don't have choice. Nature has not given you any choices. Nature has not given you any choices in form of the topographical occurrence of the water, the regional occurrence of the water. Nature has not given you any choices with respect to the management principles that can be applied. And you have to apply them through the national water policy. So this is an area which requires a very deep understanding. If your hydrology is wrong, your policies are likely to be wrong, or the policies, even though they may be promulgated, will not be successful. They will not be really achieved. So it's very important that when we look at the national water policy, at least I feel that National Water Policy 2012 has given a reasonably well thought to the hydrology. But then when the domain goes in the areas which are not essentially populated by the hydrologists or by the people who appreciate hydrology, there can be some kind of issues which may come up, and those issues may become a bone of contention later on. So it's very important that the intrinsic balance of water supply and demand is understood through the hydrological principles, and then they are managed well. The water supply and sanitation is, of course, a prime aim. In fact, the earlier water policies, which prioritized the various usages, put the drinking water and sanitation at the top level, because that is where the humankind as well as the animals kingdoms are all requiring that water for the biological processes and in order to survive. So the water supply and sanitation, because of the fact that the health status of the communities will be very seriously affected if you don't have the proper sanitation policies. And those sanitation policies will also have to dovetail in them the reuse and recycle policies, because otherwise you may not have adequate fresh water resources in order to provide to your adequate quality supply demand. So there are various means that are already provided in the water policy. The enhancing the availability through the reuse, recycle, and also through the interbasin transfers of water on the basis of merits of each case, after evaluating environment, economic, and social impacts of such transfers. There are common integrated perspective towards the water management, which right in the beginning it is establishing certain principles, as you can see. The integrated water resources management is a very key part that has been put in the 2012 policy. The governance part has been put in, wherein the framework law was also proposed, even though this particular manner in which this framework law was proposed ended up becoming a very difficult negotiation between various states, and we haven't been able to really achieve this framework law, because the framework law essentially tries to provide you with a demand assuredness, or some kind of a assurances over your computation and your assessment of your demands. But then there are various other issues that come up in this framework, which is not really coming up well. The institutional arrangements are important. We do not have a national forum to deliberate upon issues relating to water, to evolve consensus, cooperation, and reconciliation amongst the parties with a parallel mechanism within the states. The water resources regulatory authorities are being talked about, but the issue is that the regulatory authorities are not essentially consultative authorities. The forum has to have a consultative authority within which you are able to consult each other, you are able to understand each other's points of view. The water dispute tribunals to solve the disputes expeditiously are also covered as a part of the water resources water policy. Transboundary rivers have also been provided with great concerns, because we know a very major part of our water resources that we are receiving are all transboundary. Even though they are getting generated in areas which are relatively less developed and relatively less equipped for management of water at the local level, but then the transboundary nature provides us with certain opportunities as well as certain challenges, and we will need to be more cooperative and more involved with some of our critical immediate neighbors, so that we are able to achieve a goal of mutual prosperity. The adaptation to climate change, we talked about it, and this is also a concern that is there in the water policy. The conservation of river corridors, water bodies, and infrastructure. Again, this becomes a part of the overall basin management level planning. The management of flood and drought. These are the two major disasters which strike us every year and every time. And there, how do you manage this flood and drought? Many times you are having the flood and drought in the same monsoon, in the same area, and these changes are important. Research and capacity building, we already had a discussion earlier, but then the database and information systems, we have been able to establish a Indian Water Resources Information System and also a National Water Informatics Center. But then still, the lot of work is still pending in these areas. The training needs are also required, and then the implementation where the very various measures have been given. Most of them have not been addressed so far. So these challenges are faced in the implementation. The sensitive and challenging areas are there. The pricing is a very important area. The community participation, participatory irrigation management is another area. The community-based groundwater management, how do you really work with the groundwater management are there. So there are various areas which have been addressed, and there are various areas which are yet to be addressed. We need to look at all these things in a manner that we are able to achieve an equitable water sources regime. Some good amount of work has been done, but then a lot more is yet to be done. That is the situation of water policy. Thank you very much. I think we have we have some time where we can have, if there are any questions or any discussions that the participants would like to bring out, we'll be very happy to discuss that.
Thank you, sir. Now, question answer session is open for participants. If you have any doubt, any questions, you can write down in the chat box or you can ask directly to our speaker. Sir, there is one question from Mr. Sehwag Siddiqui. How have we performed on principles and postulations, directions of National Water Policy 2012 in last 10 years? There is a major disconnect between national water policy and state water policies.
Can you, is it written here or?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. It is in chat box.
Okay, because this is a rather long.
Probably I'll ask the question myself,
yes,
sir.
Yeah.
Very good morning, Shavani Siddiqui this side. So, sir, you see, in the national water policy, there is a provision that states must revamp their water policies to have the synergy or compatibility with the NWP 2012. There is this provision in the 2012 policy itself that we talked about just now.
Yeah.
But we have seen that not much has happened at the state level in the last 10 years as far as national water policy goes. So, sir, do you see, in your experience, do you see a major disconnect why national water policy could not move much forward at the implementation level? What is a major limitation in your understanding that you see?
Yes, Shavaik, the major problem that we face when we try to integrate the nation from the water point of view is that the interpretation of the constitutional provisions that were there, and also the the reluctance at the federal level to go and provide a kind of a very guiding guiding kind of directions is something that is not to the extent that we would have liked. There were what happened was that there was a kind of a political homogeneity in the earlier days, which led to some of the solutions. But then the problem is that the issue is that now the homogeneity has been lost, and because of that the space for dialogue has been has shrunk very considerably. Whereas the technical demands and the technical requirements are still remaining the same. We cannot have solutions other than what we have been thinking and what we have been implementing all across the world. So this disconnect has led to the problem that the water policy is not being implemented or not being looked at by the states, because each state is trying to become an sovereign entity and becoming and put their requirements as a kind of a predominant requirements in irrespective of what could be your responsibilities. When you get a right, you also get the responsibility. And in an interconnected kind of water resources regime, when you want to develop your own resources, the very important part is that how much part of your resources is actually a resource which is meant for somebody else. So it's a kind of a division of that joint property between brothers, and there these issues have precluded or sort of eluded the water policy implementation.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Yeah.
Very well answered. Thank you so much, sir.
Yeah. There is one question here. Due to climate change, there is a need to think about spillway capacity of the dam constructed earlier. Yes, this is a part of the dam safety part, and definitely there are now the standards have changed, and because of the new standards, we need to systematically revise the flood risk to the dam, and then according to the that particular part, we need to provide that. So that part is being very well taken care by the Dam Safety Act.
Yes, any more questions, please? You can write down in chat box or ask directly to our speaker. Yes, Tareja sir. Sir, Tareja sir, kindly ask your question, please.
No, it's always informative to learn from Pandya Sahab, and NW organizes very useful programs. Sometimes I keep thinking that the one thing which we have to focus in some way is that farmers need water when the crop needs it. That means water should be in their control. Likewise, in a household also, when you open a tap, you should get water. Is it possible that we can have a time frame to reach to that stage? I think Pandya Sahab, with his full background besides the national water policy, should be able to list out some kind of a time frame.
2015
Yeah, Tareja Sahab, actually you have posed a very difficult question for which not many answers can be there. The important part is that there is also an upper bound where we have a situation where we can say that we have got this much available, and then we keep on expanding our demands. That demands and supply will no longer remain matching beyond a point. So it will have to be a holistic approach. We'll have to restrain our demands by way of various measures, like providing better crop varieties. We also have to provide with the variation and migration from one cropping pattern to another without affecting our economy. Simultaneously, we will also have to look at the regime which looks at the basin as a whole, and then we will also need to do a certain amount of trans basin transfers, which can be also not only the within the country but also in the transboundary context. Unless all these things are brought in together, then it will be necessary. It will be possible for us to really say that yes, I mean we'll get water on demand, because the demand also will have to match the supplies. We can't have a unilateral regime where we simply say demands and no more supplies. I mean, no more consideration of the supplies. So thank you very much for putting such a.
Yeah, in chat box there is again question from Dr. Selva Valans, WPRS. Whether the gate operation rule curves made while building dams are valid today also, as we are approaching integrated reservoir operation, is this create floods? If so, how to modify the rule curves?
See, number one, this is a very wrong formulation that the gate operation create floods. Floods are created by the nature and by the hydrology setup of the basin. Floods are not created by your operating gates. That's number one. The rule curves are also dynamic. We may have to revise them at some periods of time because the capacities are also getting lost time and again. The rainfall patterns are also changing. So that is something which requires an examination on a systematic manner at every level, and that some part is being done in the Dam Safety Act, but then the other major part of the basin level water management is something which is not yet coming through any kind of legislative mechanism.
Thank you, sir. There is again one question from Dr. KJ Ananda Kumar. He is asking, with change in utilization and change in demand with shrinking availability of water resources, is it not right time to have new national water policy after 10 years?
Really speaking, the policy at 2012 has provided you with all the guiding principles that can be there as a part of the as a part of a scientific water management regime. What we really need is a strategy. There is no need to keep on revising the policy, because policy is a document which simply says that this is what we would like to do. But then if you do not do that, then you revise the policy and still you are not going to do it. So we haven't been able to establish a mechanism for implementation of the national water policy, and that is the right time to have an implementation mechanism which will say that now that we have waited for 10 years, now we will start implementing it in a particular manner. But then looking at the kind of environment that is there in the socio-political arena, those things are looking to be very, very far.
Thank you, sir. Sir, there is a question. Is there any impact of global warming and climate change in already constructed dam? If so, how to deal with it effectively?
Well, there is a definite impact on the already constructed reservoirs. Not exactly dam; it's basically a reservoir that gets affected. And to deal with it effectively is to set this dam in its new hydrological regime, like conserving its capacity, also changing the operational rules, also changing the demand patterns in the beneficiary areas, so that the reservoir is still able to provide the needs. So it's a holistic lot of interdisciplinary work that requires to be done for handling the impacts of climate change.
Thank you, sir. There is next question. Since the water is state subject, how effective is national water policy to align the state's priority and policy for the overall national water security? If you would have also say something about the National Water Framework Bill.
You see, National Water Framework Bill was basically trying to provide, at that point of time, the National Water Framework Bill was trying to provide a kind of a certain minimum basic right of water. But then that framework bill was silent on how that particular rights will be ensured or how those particular rights will be implemented. And then the question that arose was that, what are my rights? do I say these are my rights and then those become your rights, or does somebody else also determine that these are your justifiable rights and then we'll provide you with those rights? So that is where the negotiations between the states about the National Water Framework Bill didn't really progress much. And so far the bill has not gone into the parliament for the enactment. Then there's one: urban rivers are heavily polluted in our country. Minimum good quality water flow is ensured at all times in the river so that river ecology is maintained and self-purification of the polluted urban rivers is restored. This is a simple part. We have to do efficient land management and also the sewage management in the urban areas, which we are ignoring. So unless a program like Clean Ganga program, a national mission on Clean Ganga kind of program is something that requires to be implemented for every river.
Thank you, sir. Yes, any more questions, please?
मिलिंद सर, आई एम राजेंद्र पोद्दार.
Yes, sir. पूछिए आप क्वेश्चन पूछ सकते हैं.
So nice to hear Pandya sir. Very enlightening presentation. Thank you, sir, Pandya sir.
Yeah.
I have two observations. One will be repetition, the other will be fresh one. My basic point is, sir, this is a set of principles, national water policy, which you have been part of in its formulation. What I feel is there has to be some instrument to see that the principles get translated into judiciable acts at the state level. As somebody shared and everybody knows, state is a water subject and center cannot interfere directly. And we definitely need national water policy. States also do have their water policies. But national water policy is very important in the federal system. My suggestion, or very humble suggestion, is that we should think of some instruments where it helps us to translate this very valuable policy document into judiciable acts or rules or regulations. For example, you mentioned two important things. One is benchmarking of the project. Though Central Water Commission has been insisting on benchmarking of projects, it's not actually happening at the grassroots level, at the state level. And there is some apprehension. That apprehension needs to be removed, that they think they are putting it to test, or there are interstate disputes, we may be exposed, etc. A congenial atmosphere has to be built so that it's a self-evaluation where we are doing better and who is not doing. But we can, as a collective a nation, we can think of some solutions. Nobody should take it in negative sense. Benchmarking is an example where we can translate it to action. Benchmarking has to be done. Second is repetition of my point again, as usual. Water is actually or finally meant for the farmers at the field level and the consumers in cities and the villages. Their voice has to be heard. Their involvement, as I have always valued this national water policy, because it emphasized on participatory irrigation management and participatory water resource management. That's also not judiciable. Though we have acts at the state level, still I think this learned body should consider, especially Pandya sir is at the helm of affairs, how to ensure from the central government that there is effective implementation of participatory irrigation management. Then definitely the national water policy will get its respect that it deserves. Thank you very much, sir.
Yeah. Thank you. You have already said many things. One thing I kind of noted is that you said that the states are sovereign and central government has a very little role, and that is the crux of the matter. Because when you talk about the nation, then the individual units have to fit into the nation. If the individual units remain outside the nation in its own identity, then the common principles cannot be implemented. So that is where the whole problem really lies. And then, of course, the other aspects of the social and economic aspects of water management is something that requires to be that requires to be understood more, and also requires to be handled well. Handling social issues, social preferences, and economic preferences is not an easy task, and for that it requires to be done in a very balanced manner. We require much more cohesion at the national level between various political entities in order to mobilize the public opinion in this direction.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I think.
Sir, good afternoon. This is Professor Jyoti Prakash from IIT Bombay.
Mhm.
It's very interesting and eye-opening talk for all working in water resources engineering. I think, sir, now we have to make use of this AI-based inflow prediction and reservoir operational models, because nowadays, after 50, 60 years of their inception, the operating policies needs a major change. We can use the knowledge of AI, artificial intelligence, to revive the operational plans. That point also we can take up.
Yeah.
CWC can take up as one of the agenda, so that whoever is interested, they can write a software for operational plans. They can write a software for inflow prediction. It may be a one step forward direction in hydrological modeling, which will be very useful to the executive engineer who is operating the dam, especially during the floods. So that is my small suggestion, sir.
Yeah. Yeah.
Next time we
Thank
can
you.
include this
Yeah.
also, sir.
Yeah, thank you very much for a very nice suggestion. For that, actually a lot of capacity building is required.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Because the capacity, these concepts which we are providing, those concepts are something that requires a relative simplification, to the extent that the persons who are using them are able to do it without going through a very great rigor
Yes,
from the theoretical or from the software point of view. And simultaneously, we also need a very strong background database. Unfortunately, in the water resources management area, the prime problem is the data. Even though we have got good resource availability data,
yes, sir.
the utilization data is guarded very aggressively by the individual stakeholders, and the actual data is something which is very difficult to get, and these models are largely dependent upon this kind of achieving a balance between the two, and there the situation becomes quite tough when we have to do the further development in the models. But this is a good
I
good
Yes, sir.
opportunity for.
I fully agree with you, sir. Our AI model depends upon the data availability. But, sir, there are several dams and reservoirs in India which has very rich data, sir. At least daily data, if hourly data is not available. For example, thanks to Ministry of Water Resources, we had an R&D project in 2010 to 13. We developed an AI-based reservoir inflow prediction model to Koina Reservoir, sir. We implemented it. We gave training for 2 years. It was used for next 2-3 years. But as you said, the persons utilizing it should continue it.
Yeah.
So
A lot of capacity building
yes, sir.
efforts are required.
Sure, sir. I agree with you, sir. I agree. Capacity building is needed.
Then those things come in the way, because your scientific advice comes in the way of sometimes the vested interests, and that leads to the failure of your well set up systems. That's
Yes,
also
yes.
something is a part of life.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
हाँ, मेरे को
I think
कुछ बोलने का है। अगर हिंदी में बोले तो चलेगा क्या? हेलो?
hello, go ahead. हाँ, बोलिए।
हिंदी में बोलेगा तो चलेगा क्या?
हाँ,
Fluent में
बोलिए।
बोल सकता हूँ। इंग्लिश में मैं बोल नहीं सकता।
कोई बात नहीं, आप हिंदी में बोलिए।
अभी जो क्वेश्चन आईआईटी ने प्रोफेसर ने बताया था, तो कोयना मॉडल जो फ्लड आता है तब वो डिस्चार्ज जो मेजर करता है, वो मेजर जो होता है वो अभी ब्रिटिश काल का जो फॉर्मूला है CH/3/2 3LH/3/2, उससे ही वो फ्लड का मेजर करता है। तो महाराष्ट्र गवर्नमेंट को आप क्या सजेशन देंगे कि वो जो फ्लड का जो विसर्ग है वो अभी नया तरीके से वो मेजर करना चाहिए, और जो वाटर रेन गेज वाटर है, वो रेन गेज वाटर भी बहुत कम है, उसके लिए
ऐसा
आप क्या
है
सजेशन
कि
करेंगे?
ऐसा है कि देखिए कुछ चीजें जो है ना, वो वो जैसे दो दो दूनी दो वो चार होते हैं, उस तरीके की सर्वथा सत्य होती हैं। वो फॉर्मूला ऐसा नहीं है कि वो फॉर्मूला जो है वो समय के साथ वो एक्सपायर हो जाती हैं। वो तो कुछ कुछ चीजें जो है वो तो आपकी एज ए स्टैंडर्ड चलती हैं। साइमल्टेनियसली ये है कि जो है वो प्रोजेक्ट को मैनेज करने के लिए जो प्रोजेक्ट का जो मैनेजर है, उन्होंने अपने आप को जो है वो चेंज करते रहना पड़ता है। और उसके लिए जो है वो जो जो फंडिंग है, जो रिसोर्सेस हैं, उसको जो कंसर्न्ड स्टेट गवर्नमेंट के जो डिपार्टमेंट्स हैं उन्होंने देनी होती है। हालांकि अपने यहाँ बहुत ज्यादा एम्फेसिस जो है नए प्रोजेक्ट बनाने में है और पुराने प्रोजेक्ट के सामने देखना नहीं है। तो इस एटीट्यूड की वजह से कुछ चीजें जो है वो नहीं हो पाती हैं। तो वो जो प्रोजेक्ट का ओनर है, जो स्टेट गवर्नमेंट है, उन्होंने इसके बारे में देखना चाहिए।
इसके लिए आप क्या सजेशन करेंगे स्टेट गवर्नमेंट को?
हम हमारा कोई इसमें, क्योंकि ये जो मामला है, ये मामला के बारे में जो है वो कोई ऐसा कोई विदाउट कोई चीज देखे समझे बगैर कोई सजेशन देने का कोई मतलब नहीं बनता है। हम लोग जो है वो ये इस पर्टिकुलर डिस्कशन में हम लोग उस एरिया में है नहीं, तो इसलिए पुटिंग इन दैट इज डिफिकल्ट।
नहीं है ना, आप कृष्णा रिवर पे चार और 4-5 से आप वो फ्लड करते हैं, मेजर करते हैं, लेकिन स्टेट गवर्नमेंट जो करता है वो ये पुराने मेथड से करता है।
ऐसा है कि ये जो एरिया है ना, ये एरिया आज के टॉपिक का वो विषय नहीं है। सो ऑलरेडी हम लोग जो है वो काफी टाइम वाइज हम काफी
दि-
आगे चले गए हैं। तो
दीवान जी
आज
दीवान
इसको
जी
करना
इसको,
बड़ा
हाँ,
मुश्किल है।
दीवान जी इसको जो है आप स्टेट गवर्नमेंट के साथ जो है डील कर दिया, फिर अलग से हम लोग इसको टेकअप करेंगे, है ना?
हाँ
सर
हाँ, वही करना चाहिए।
सर, नेक्स्ट क्वेश्चन, व्हाट इज द रोल ऑफ स्टेट वाटर पॉलिसी और नेशनल वाटर पॉलिसी एंड वाटर पोल्यूशन?
वाटर पॉल्यूशन इज समथिंग दैट हैज टू बी अवॉइडेड एट ऑल कॉस्ट। उसमें कोई स्टेट वाटर पॉलिसी और नेशनल वाटर पॉलिसी में डिफरेंसेस होने का तो कोई खास ज्यादा संभावना नहीं है। हालांकि जो स्टेट वाटर पॉलिसीज हैं, वो स्टेट वाटर पॉलिसी में जो जो स्टेटमेंट्स जो बनते हैं, वो स्टेटमेंट्स ऐसे होने चाहिए जो कि नेशनल वाटर पॉलिसी के ओवरऑल फ्रेमवर्क में वो दूसरे स्टेट के फ्रेमवर्क में भी वो फिट हो पाए। तो इसीलिए वो जो प्रिंसिपल हैं, वो प्रिंसिपल नेशनल वाटर पॉलिसी के फ्रेमवर्क में रह के इम्प्लीमेंट करने से स्टेट वाटर पॉलिसी जो है वो सक्सेसफुल हो सकती है।
थैंक यू सर। नेक्स्ट क्वेश्चन प्लीज।
आई थिंक
यस सर।
अब कोई इसमें कोई क्वेश्चंस है नहीं।
नहीं है सर, नहीं
या
है। थैंक यू सर। नाउ आई एम कंक्लूडिंग दिस सेशन। आई थैंक्स टू अवर
एक मिनट, मैं थोड़ा सा एक छोटा सा क्वेश्चन
sir.
पूछूंगा।
हाँ हाँ थोड़ी
Yes,
सा।
ये महाराष्ट्र रेगुलेटरी अथॉरिटी एक बार काफी एक्टिव हुई थी। Is there any way that at a national level and at other state level some kind of a regulatory authorities take shape? Will it make a difference in our water sector as well?
Water regulatory authority can do good work provided it is supported politically, because that is what we have seen in case of the water resources authorities that are being established at various states. The one central authority that we could establish because of the Dam Safety Act is the National Dam Safety Authority. it is still time to really know to what extent it becomes successful, because it is still in its infancy. I
Thank
think,
you, sir.
Milind, should we conclude?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Now we are concluding this session. Thank you, sir, for guiding us on the very important topic, national water policy, and covering in this the important guiding principles of national water policy 2012, then focus areas of national water policy 2012, then demand management and water use efficiency, then managing supply side balance, supply management, balancing demand supply equation, then water supply and sanitation engineering considering water policy, then common integrated perspective towards water management, water governance, environmental concerns, research and role of research and capacity building in framing national water policy, then how to implement the national water policy, then challenges and concerns of national water policy, challenges faced during the implementation of national water policy in India, then sensitive and challenging areas. So many points, sir, have detail covered in this session. Now I conclude this session and giving the vote of thanks to all on behalf of National Water Academy, Central Water Commission, Pune. I extend my heartfelt gratitude to all the esteemed participants, speaker, then attendees for joining us today for this enlightening webinar series on interstate river water disputes in India. It has been really intellectually stimulating and enriching session where we had the opportunity to hear from the renowned water expert. His diverse perspective and valuable insight have shed light on complexities of complexities of national water policy. We are extremely grateful to our today's distinguished speaker, Honorable Shri A.B. Pandya sir, for sparing his precious time and sharing his extensive knowledge and experience with us. Their comprehensive presentation have not only deepened our understanding but also inspired us to take closer look at pressing challenges in water sector. I would also like to thanks to special words of thanks to all participants who actively involved in panel discussion as well as question answer session. Your contribution enriched the deliberation and help vibrant exchange of idea. Furthermore, I would like to express our sincere gratitude to Chairman and ex-officio Secretary to the Government of India, Shri Ora sir, who is the driving force behind the various activities of National Water Academy, along with his generous support and guiding, making NW Pune to venture ahead. I also thanks to Chief Engineer and Head of National Water Academy, Shri D. Chaskar sir. Last but certainly not least, I would like to thank our dedicated team, technical team and support staff who work tirelessly behind the scene to ensure the seamless execution of this webinar series. In conclusion, again, I once again thanks to everyone. Thank you again. Once again, everyone who has been part of this webinar. We look forward to future endeavor and collaborations in our pursuit of solving interstate river water disputes in India. There is small announcement. Our next session will be on 7 September and the topic will be Interstate River Water Dispute Tribunal. And there is with us renowned eminent water expert, Shri Chetan Pandit sir. He is former member Water Planning and Project Central Water Commission. Thank you. Once again, thank you to everyone for joining with this webinar series. Thank you. Namaskar.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
ನಂದು ಇನ್ಕ್ರಿಮೆಂಟ್ ಅದು ಲೆಟರ್ ಬಂದಿಲ್ಲ ಮೇಡಮ್. ಏನಂತ? ಹಾ 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 ಅಲ್ಲ ಇನ್ನ ಎಷ್ಟು ದಿವಸ ಬೇಕಾ ಅಪ್ಡೇಟ್ ಮಾಡಕ್ಕೆ? ಹ್ಮ್ ಆಗಿದ್ಯಾ? ನಾವು ಹೋದ್ ತಿಂಗಳಿಂದ ಮಾಡಿಲ್ಲ ಮೇಡಮ್. ಇಲ್ವಲ್ಲ, ಮಾಡಿಲ್ಲ. ಹ್ಮ್ ಇವರು ಏನೋ ರಿಜಿಸ್ಟರ್ ಬಂದ್ಮೇಲೆ ಮಾಡಿ ಅಂತ. ಇದು ಎನ್ಕ್ಯಾಶ್ಮೆಂಟ್ ಬಂತಾ? ಏನಂತೆ? ಸ್ಯಾಲ್ರಿ ಆದ್ಮೇಲ? ಅಲ್ಲ ಮೇಡಮ್, ಇದು ಕೃಷ್ಣದು ಎಲ್ಲ ನೋಡಿ ನೋಡಿ ಆಗ್ತಾ ಇದೆ ನಾನೇ. ಅಲ್ಲ ಹಾಕಿಲ್ಲ ಇವಾಗ, ಎಲ್ಲರೂ ಹಾಕ್ಬೇಕಂತೆ ನೋಡಿ. ನಾನೇ ಅಂತಲ್ಲ, ಕರೆದ್ಬಿಟ್ಟು ಎಲ್ಲರಿಗೂ ಹೇಳಿ ಸ್ಟ್ಯಾಂಡಿಂಗ್ ಇನ್ಸ್ಟ್ರಕ್ಷನ್.
ಮಾಡೋದನ್ನ ಬಿಟ್ಟು ಇವಾಗ ರಿಟರ್ನ್ ಸಬ್ಮಿಷನ್ ಎಲ್ಲ ಮಾಡೋದಿದೆ, ಬೇರೆ ಕೈ ಕೊಡೋದೆಲ್ಲ ಇರುತ್ತಲ್ಲ, ಈಗ ಅದನ್ನ ಬಿಟ್ಟು ನಾನು ಪೇಪರ್
ಹೌದು. ಅಲ್ಲ ನಡ್ಕೊಂಡು ಹೋಗೋದನ್ನ
ಅವ್ರನ್ನ ಹೇಳ್ತಾರೆ ಇದು ಮಾಡಕ್ಕಾಗಲ್ಲ, ಈಗ ಅವ್ರು ಇರ್ತಾರ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳ್ತಾರೆ. ಇವಾಗ ನಾನು ಇವಾಗ ರೊಟೀನ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇರೋದನ್ನ ಬಿಟ್ಬಿಡ್ಲ ಸರ್?
ಹೌದು ಹೌದು ಹೌದು, ಅರ್ಥ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ.
ಯಾಕಂದ್ರೆ ವಿ ಹ್ಯಾವ್ ಟು ಸ್ಪೆಂಡ್ ಟೈಮ್ ಆನ್ ದಟ್ ಅಲ್ವಾ ಸರ್?
ಮೇಡಮ್, ಮೊನ್ನೆ ಇವರು ಕಾರ್ತರ್ಕಿ ಬಂದಿದ್ರಲ್ಲ, ಅಪ್ಪರ್ ಭದ್ರಾ ಪ್ರಾಜೆಕ್ಟ್ದು ನೋಟ್ಸ್ ಕೊಟ್ಟಿದಾರಲ್ಲ, ಇದು ಈವೆಂಟ್ಸ್ ಎಲ್ಲ ಮಾಡಿದ್ರಲ್ಲ. ಹ್ಮ್
ಬೇಕಾಗಿರೋ ಕನೆಕ್ಷನ್ಸ್ ಎಲ್ಲಾನು ರೆಡಿ ಮಾಡಿಸ್ಬಿಟ್ಟು ಕಳಿಸ್ಕೊಡಿ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿ ಅವ್ರ ಪ್ರಾಜೆಕ್ಟ್ ಬಂದಿದ್ರೆ ಹೇಳಿ ಕಳಿಸ್ತು. ಪ್ರಾಜೆಕ್ಟ್ ವಾಪಸ್ ರೆಡಿ ಕಳಿಸಿದ್ದಾರೆ, ಅದನ್ನ ಸ್ಕ್ಯಾನ್ ಮಾಡಿ ಡೆಲ್ಲಿ ಕಳಿಸಿದೆ ಸರ್. ಅಲ್ಲಿವರೆಗೂ ನಿಂತಿದೆ ಇವಾಗ ಅದು.
ಇವಾಗ ಇವ್ರಿಗೆ ಹಾಕ್ಬೇಕಾ? ಅಲ್ಲಿಂದ ಬಂದಿರೋ ಅನೆಕ್ಷನ್ಸ್ ಎಲ್ಲ ಸೇರಿಸಿ
ಡೆಲ್ಲಿ ಕಳಿಸಿದೆ ಅಷ್ಟೇ. ಏನ್ ಮಾಡಿದ್ದಾರೆ?
ರಘುಪತಿಗೆ ಒಂದು ಲೆಟರ್ ಹಾಕ್ಬೇಕಾ?
ಕಳಿಸ್ಬೋದು ಸರ್. ಈ ತರ ನೋಟ್ ಕಳಿಸಿದ್ರಿ, ಅದು ಪ್ರಾಜೆಕ್ಟಿನವ್ರಿಗೆ, ಪ್ರಾಜೆಕ್ಟ್ನವ್ರಿಂದ ನಾವು ಇನ್ಪುಟ್ಸ್ ಕೇಳಿದ್ವಿ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳುವಂತ ಲೆಟರ್ ಹೋಗಿದ್ದಾವೆ ಪ್ರಾಜೆಕ್ಟ್ನವ್ರಿಗೆ. ರಿಪ್ಲೈ ಮಾಡ್ತಾರೆ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿದ್ರೆ ಅದನ್ನ ಹಾಕಿ ಮುಗಿಸ್ಬೋದು ಸರ್.
ಅದೊಂದು ಹಾಕ್ಬಿಡಂಗಲ್ಲ.
ಮೇಲ್ ಹೋಗಿದೆ ಅಲ್ಲ, ಏನು ಅಥೆಂಟಿಕೇಶನ್ ಇರಲ್ಲ ಸರ್, ಹಂಗ್ ಮಾಡಿಸಿದ್ವಿ. ಅವಾಗ ಆ ನೋಟಿಗೆ ರಿಪ್ಲೈನು ಆದಂಗ ಆಗುತ್ತಲ್ವಾ?
ಹೌದೌದೌದು, ಅದೇ ಕೇಳೋಣ, ನಿನ್ನೆ ಕೇಳೋಣ ಅಂತ ಇದ್ದೆ.
ರಘುಪತಿನೂ ಕಳಿಸ್ಬಿಡಿ. ಬೇಕಿದ್ರೆ ಈ ಅಡ್ವೈಸರ್ ಕೊಡಕ್ಕೆ ಏನಾದ್ರು ಕೇಳ್ತೀರಾ ನೋಡಿ ಸರ್.
ಅಡ್ವೈಸರ್ಗೆ
ಪ್ರಾಜೆಕ್ಟ್ ಈ ತರ ಅನೇಕ್ಷನ್ಸ್ ಕಳಿಸಿದ್ದಾರೆ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳ್ಬಿಟ್ಟು ಆ ನೋಟ್ ಮೇಲೆ ಈ ತರ ಕಳಿಸಿದ್ದಾರೆ ಅಂತ. ಈಗ ನಾವು ನೋಟಿಸ್ ಬಂದಿಲ್ಲ ಅಂತ ಮುಂದ್ಸರಿ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ ಸರ್, ಅದಕ್ಕೋಸ್ಕರ.
ಯಾರಿಗೆ? ಶ್ರೀರಾಮಯ್ಯ ಅವ್ರ? ಓಕೆ
ಈಗ ಅದೊಂದು ಪ್ರಾಬ್ಲಮ್ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ. ಇಲ್ಲಾಂದ್ರೆ ಪ್ರೋಸೆಸ್ ಅಂದ್ಬಿಡ್ತಾರೆ, ಹಂಗೆ ಏನಾಗ್ಬಿಡುತ್ತೆ ಗೊತ್ತಾ? ಹೌದಾ, ನಾನು ನೋಡಿಲ್ಲ ಅಂತ ಇದಾಗ್ಬಿಡುತ್ತೆ ಈ ಸಾರಿ ಅಂತ ಅಷ್ಟೇ.
ರಘುಪತಿ ಕಳ್ಸಿರಲ್ಲ, ಅವಾಗ ಇವ್ರಿಗೂ ಒಂದು ಕಾಪಿ ಕೊಟ್ಟು, ಕಾಪಿ ಒಂದು ಹಾಕ್ಬಿಟ್ಟು.
ಬೇಡ ಸರ್,
ಓಕೆ,
ನಾವು ಆಂತರಿಕ ಟಿಪ್ಪಣಿ ಹಾಕ್ತೀವಲ್ಲ ಸರ್,
ಹಂಗ ಹಾಕ್ಬಿಟ್ಟು ಕೊಡ್ತೀನಿ.
ಜಸ್ಟ್ ಫಾರ್ ಇನ್ಫಾರ್ಮೇಶನ್. ನಿಮಗೆ ರಘುಪತಿ ಅವ್ರು ನೋಟ್ ಬಂದಿತ್ತು, ಅದಕ್ಕೆ ಸಂಬಂಧಪಟ್ಟಂತ ಅನೆಕ್ಷನ್ ಪ್ರೊಜೆಕ್ಟ್ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿದ್ವಿ. ಇಂಥ ಅನೆಕ್ಷನ್ಸ್ ಕಳಿಸಿದರೆ ಇಂಥ ಲೆಟರ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ.
ಓಕೆ, ಸರಿ, ಕೈಂಡ್ ಇನ್ಫಾರ್ಮೇಶನ್.
ಅದೊಂದು ರೀತಿ ಅಂತ ಅಷ್ಟೇ.
ಓಕೆ.
ಪ್ರಾಜೆಕ್ಟ್ ಏನಾದ್ರೂ ಅಂತ ಲೆಟರ್ ಹಾಕಿದ್ವಿ ಇದರಿಂದ
ಮೇಡಮ್.
ಅಷ್ಟೇ ಕೊಡ್ತಿದ್ದಾರೆ ಸರ್.
ಆಮೇಲೆ ಅದರಲ್ಲಿ ಅನೆಕ್ಸರ್ 13 11 ಏನು ಕೊಟ್ಟಿಲ್ಲ. ಅದೇ ಅದನ್ನ ಒಂದು ಜೆರಾಕ್ಸ್ ಮಾಡಿ ಹಾಕಿದ್ದಾರೆ. ಹೌದೌದು. ಅಲ್ಲ ಅದಕ್ಕೇನೆ ಸುಮ್ನೆ ಇವಾಗ ಇರೋ ಸಿಚುಯೇಷನ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಯಾಕೆ ಹೇಳ್ದೆ ನಾವ್ ಹಾಕೋಬೇಕು? ಮೇಡಮ್ ನಾನೇ ಹಾಕ್ತಾ ಇದೆ ಆದ್ರೂನು ಓಕೆ ಮೇಡಮ್. ಕಫ ಹೋಗೇ ಇಲ್ಲ ಮೇಡಮ್.
ಅದೇ ಅಂತ ಏನೋ ಆಗಿದೆ ಗಾಳಿನಲ್ಲಿ ಯಾರೋ ಏನೋ ಹಾಕಿದ್ದಾರೆ ಅಂದರೆ ಸರಿ ಇಲ್ಲ.